Hey, good morning. It's good to be with you. I'm now back live. Well, not live. It's Wednesday morning, so I'm recording for Thursday. But you got a whole bunch of me that was in the can for a couple weeks there, or about a week or so. But anyway, we're back now to kind of our normal schedule. So it's good to be back. I hope you enjoyed where we've been thus far in Acts. And today we're going to pick up with Acts chapter 5. It'll be verse 17. Acts, the rest of this chapter. There's 42 verses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break, even though in my Bible, this is one section, I'm going to break this up into two readings. So we're going to look at this passage over the next 2 days. Today, we're going to look at chapter 5, 17 through 26. And then tomorrow, we'll look at 27 through 42. You know, I figure I prefer to go smaller passages that we can get a little bit more in depth. You can look at a little bit more. You know, if you're covering a whole lot of ground, you don't have as much time to really dig into it. So I want to just kind of break this up into two readings. So we'll look at chapter 5, verses 17 through 26. And the high priest took action. And you got to remember, this is after a lot of stuff's been happening, a lot of healings, growth, things like that. So the high priest took action. He and all who were with him, that is the sect of the Sadducees, being filled with jealousy, arrested the apostles and put them in public prison. But during the night, an angel of the Lord opened the prison doors and brought them out and said, "Go, stand in the temple and tell the people the whole message about this life." When they heard this, they entered the temple at daybreak and went on with their teaching. When the high priest and those with him arrived, they called together the council and sent the whole body of elders of Israel and sent to the prison to have them brought. When the police went there, they did not find them in the prison. So they returned and reported, "We found the prison securely locked and the guards standing at the doors. But when we opened them, we found no one inside." Now, when the captain of the temple and the chief priest heard of these words, they were perplexed about them, wondering what might be going on. Then someone arrived and announced, "Look, the men who you put in prison are standing in the temple and are teaching the people." Then the captain went with the temple police and brought them, but without violence, for they were afraid of being stoned by the people. Okay, so we're going to see now beginning of a pattern. Well, we've already witnessed earlier in chapter 4 when Peter and John were brought before the council. We're going to see this pattern repeat multiple times throughout the rest of Acts. You're going to see the apostles, whether they be Peter and the apostles in Jerusalem, preaching and teaching, and then arrested and taken into prison, or whether it later in the book of Acts, it's Paul. But we're going to see the same pattern repeat several times throughout the rest of this passage, this book rather. Preaching, being faithful to the gospel, imprisonment, and God's provision and God's salvation. Now, we don't see it for all because we're going to read into chapter, we're going to see in the coming days, some bad stuff happen. We are. But we see in all these things, both the preaching, teaching, the miracles, the wonders, the signs, these wonders and signs. Remember I said earlier that you're going to see wonders and signs over and over and over again. Signs and wonders and signs all throughout Acts. You're going to see so many miracles, some big and huge, some smaller, that all of these things point to God's glory, God's sovereignty, God's goodness, and the plan that God has for the church. So I think there's a couple things we can take away from this. One is we see that doing the right thing doesn't always mean that things are easy. I think sometimes we have this fairy tale understanding of faith. We'll see that tomorrow. Doing the right thing doesn't always mean that things are going to go well. In fact, do the right thing sometimes mean things may go bad. I talk a lot when I do revivals that I'm not a fan of what I call Christian fairy tales. Christian fairy tales are, if you do it right, just right, everything, it's going to always be just perfect. God's going to always make everything wrap up in a little bow. Like when you watch back in the days, the old sitcoms of the 80s, Cosby Show, Family Ties, stuff like that. Every show would have a dilemma that would start off early in the show. And then by the end of the episode, 30 minutes later, everything's fixed and perfect. Well, I think we've internalized that sometimes as Christians, that everything wraps up perfect. We put a little bow on it and we're done. Yay. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens, but not all the times. So we see here, and we're going to see later in tomorrow's reading that sometimes it doesn't get wrapped up in a bow. Sometimes it isn't a fairy tale. Sometimes things are hard. Yeah, sometimes things are hard. They are. We've all been there, haven't we? Every one of us, y'all, if we're going to be honest about it, we've all been there when we've done the right thing or what we feel called to do, and it isn't easy and it isn't fun. It's hard. But that doesn't mean God's not with us. Because I think that's maybe the greater lesson in Acts that we see, is that God never leaves the apostles. And not only is it that God never leaves the apostles, is that God is at work in their lives. God is at work in their story. God is at work in all that they're doing. God is at work in all this for something good. The book of Acts, in many ways, is a fulfillment, if you will, or a foreshadowing or a promise of Romans 8:28. All things work for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So we see over and over in Acts that stuff will happen. We're going to see it in this next section. We're going to see it in chapter 6 with Stephen. We're going to see so much happen, and some of it's be hard, be challenging. We're going to see it in Paul's life. We're going to see hard times, challenging moments. We're going to experience all this. But the thing we need to be reminded over and over and over and over and over and over again is the promise of Romans 8:28. All things work for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. All things. So just because we don't see it or don't experience it or may struggle with it or may have challenges or may, goodness, even have real intense struggles with all of it, y'all, that's typical. I always think of Jesus in the garden. Take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours. Because Jesus trusted in God's plan. He trusted in God's heart. He trusted in what God was doing. And so today we see them arrested. And then we see God save them. We see the angel come and rescue them. And we're going to see this over and over again, that God makes a way. And I think that's always our takeaway, y'all, is God will make a way. The way may be hard or challenging or scary or worrisome or all these type of things. The way may be uncertain. The way may be full of problems. The way may be full of pitfalls. The way may be full of potholes. The way may be full of all manner of things. But God will make a way. We see it here. He makes a way out of prison for the apostles. And because of that, they keep preaching and they keep teaching. And people keep being saved. God makes a way. So today, wherever you find yourself in this journey, whether you're uncertain about what God's called you to do or worried maybe you're in a spot you don't want to be in, maybe you're questioning why God has you where he has you, I don't know. Maybe you feel like you're the apostle stuck in prison and like, God, you sure about this? Now, understand that God sent an angel and that God got him out and that God made a way. The way may be hard. The way may be scary. The way may not be a path that we would have chosen if we were in charge and we were making all the decisions. But God will make a way, because God's way is going to be a way that glorifies him, that points others to him, and that lifts up Jesus. So today, let's make that our mission. No matter where we find ourselves, no matter what context we find ourselves in, no matter what's going on, no matter how things look or how things feel or anything like that, let's make sure that's our primary motivation, to lift up Jesus and to point others to him. For his word tells us that when we lift him up, he'll draw all people to him. And when we do that, all of this works as God wants it to. So we see the apostles arrested. We see them persecuted. Tomorrow's gonna be worse than today. So just be aware that this was the good part of the story. Tomorrow's gonna be more challenging, but we trust that God will make a way because He's good, and all things work for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So, hey, thanks for watching today. I look forward to finishing Acts chapter 5 with you tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks.